Welcome to another episode of Startup Stories, the monthly chat that aims to motivate and challenge you through inspiring stories from entrepreneurs. We chat with them about their journey, challenges, and experiences. My name is Rachel, and I'm the host of Startup Stories. And today we're again in Leuven in Studio Start after a summer break. We're joined by a live audience who will be taking questions from at the end. And for people following online, ask any questions during our chat in the chat, and then we'll address them at the end. Today, I'm joined by two gentlemen. Firstly, Emiel Cockx, the founder and CEO of Genvision. Emiel has an interesting mix of studies, music, specifically cello, and civil engineering and architecture. He went on to teach 3D modeling at Berkeley and assisted in pioneering research in 3D modeling and AI. Emiel has won multiple academic awards for his work, including the Stephen Lenci Award for 3D modeling nature and the TY Lin Prize for sustainable engineering. Welcome, Emiel.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm also joined by Jeroen Lecoutere, founder of Swimtraxx. Jeroen is a swimmer and was on the junior national team and is a national champion and record holder. He swam with teams in Belgium, the Netherlands, USA, and Australia. In the USA, he was a member of the Ohio State University varsity swim team. And in Australia, he trained with the BGS Swimming Club, where he trained with Olympic champions and world record holders. As a biomedical and electrical engineer, he performed research in both Belgium and Australia related to wearables in sports applications. And a lot of athletes and coaches he met throughout his career were not satisfied with the existing sports technology products. And this is why his team created Swimtraxx. Welcome, Jeroen.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get to know you both a little bit more. Emiel, can you tell us a little bit more about Genvision, what you do, for who and where?
Sure, totally. Thank you. So at Genvision, we measure how much carbon is being removed in nature. And that at first might seem like a silly problem. It's actually one of the biggest bottlenecks right now in the climate space, where the only way to do that right now is literally measuring trees by hand with tape measures and like doing that every single year again, which is really expensive. And so at Genvision, we're developing technology to do just that, but using satellite imagery and AI, which is much faster and much more accurate.
Cool. And you're doing that all over the world, or are there specific regions that you're mostly focused on?
Our goal, obviously, is to do this all over the world. There's a huge market in South America, but currently we're very much focused on Western Europe, both for governments to supply them with data of how much carbon is being removed in their province or city, but then also for new projects where new forests are being planted for sustainability goals to tell them how much carbon is being removed.
Okay, cool. And I was curious, we said, you've got this interesting background with music and then AI and modeling. Is there anything from your musical studies that has helped you in your professional career with Genvision or otherwise?
Yeah, probably the direct link is like there's no link whatsoever, right? But I think it's interesting because there are like a ton of things like in the way that you like learn to think or like learn to go through these processes that are in some ways like things that I really recognize in what I do currently at Genvision. And one of those things that I think that is interesting is when you're in a team, when you're in a trio, for example, in a small ensemble, while you're performing on stage, you can't talk, right? You can't communicate in the moment. You can't say like, play a little bit louder, a little softer, we're gonna go faster. Like you have to do all of that, one, by like building up this system where you understand each other, then also while you're playing, thinking about like, how do you sniff, how do you move, and communicating is like one organism that works together. And I feel like it's something that I really recognize in how we work as a team. Also like similar size, we're like 6 people now, and you can't like tell them what to do every day. So it's like building this whole system and without having to tell everybody at all times what to do. It's all about like moving as one organism towards a goal.
Cool. Do you still play now?
I still play, yeah.
Yes. Oh, great. Okay. Jeroen, can you tell us a little bit more about Swimtraxx, the product, how it has evolved?
Sure. So we started in 2018 here in Leuven, with the idea to just do something in swimming and do something great for sport, and really make a tool that keeps people moving, keep making them more active, getting people out of their seats. And that's really the vision of our company. And so we started in 18. I had already made some tracking devices in my PhD. I had some ideas technologically in my head. And from there, we built a product. We worked with a lot of coaches, a lot of swimmers. We made a tracking tool that you can use during your swims. They can see the workout live while they're swimming. You can see it on an app after your swim. So we've been building that for the past 5 years. And today we're in 15 countries, still growing, working with the biggest federations in the world to track swimmers and triathletes more accurately, getting more data out of them, understanding how to train. And we're actually now in a phase where we're getting the data and trying to understand what to do with it even more and generating more insights on top of what we're collecting. So it's super exciting to be in that space and getting to know what people are actually experiencing doing sports and how to make that experience even better.
Wow, now very interesting. So, I mean, you've had to actually then develop a device and app software platform at the same time. Has that been the biggest challenge, or are there others that you would say, well, actually, compared to this, it wasn't so difficult?
Well, they always say hardware is hard, right? So I guess I chose the wrong direction at that stage, but actually being an electrical engineer, you understand quite well what the challenges are of hardware, so that has been not that bad. Actually, we built the system in a way that we know what it can do, and with the vision actually that it can grow going forward. So, for example, this Monday we released a new software version for the hardware, upgrading the functionality of the system remotely. So, if you bought a Swimtraxx 1 year ago, it's already getting better every time you install an update. So, that's something we built into the system to be able to upgrade it. But it has been a challenge to building that platform, and I was just talking to Emiel before the talk about the challenge we've had in COVID, which is particularly hard when the pools are closed and production facilities closed down, and you just don't have facilities to test and make a product. So that has been really challenging, but we actually fought through that. So I guess that's the hardest part of the hardware product, is actually the fact that you're doing some real world thing that has to be created from materials and that stuff. So that's been a little bit of a journey, but where we are today, we're very proud that we've come through it. And going through COVID as a hardware startup is really something we're proud of, and I think we can tackle a lot of other things going forward with that in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Did COVID force you to make different decisions or changes to the path that you were on?
Yeah, so we did our sourcing in 2019, end of 2019. We were in the airport and saw people wearing masks, and we're like, what's going on here? We didn't know what a mask was back then. And so we did our sourcing with all the production partners. We set up all the collaboration when we were ready to press the start button when everything went in lockdown. And so at that point, we really were exploring how to maybe second source in other regions, but then lockdowns came in those regions. And so we pivoted temporarily, pushing on production still, like what we could do, but we pivoted into other sports and did some interesting projects, I think, gymnastics, skateboarding, fitness in the meanwhile, which was a lot of fun, using our technology in those sports, providing value to those athletes. We still have things running in that space. But yeah, that's been the unexpected, typical startup pivot, and in this case, because of COVID.
Cool, that's interesting. And I'm sure that must have given you insights then back again for in the pool for like, oh, okay, well, maybe we could still use this or that from what we learned there. Nice. Cool. Okay. Talking a little bit more about entrepreneurship. We've heard about your own struggles. Emiel, what were your biggest challenges that you faced as an entrepreneur? How did you or could other entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, overcome them if they were to face them?
Yeah, we certainly did not have to deal with COVID, which I cannot imagine even. In fact, for us, COVID was kind of the start of it all. I graduated like within the COVID pandemic, and it was just like for me, like countries were just opening up again. So it was a moment for me to just like have a little bit of a time to travel around, to work on some projects for myself. And for me, that was just like, I was working on this like project making 3D models of trees, which I thought was cool and funny, and I could maybe sell to architects who could use those models to design buildings. I don't know. It turned out to be like a terrible idea, but it was something, because nobody wants 3D models of trees as an architect. Like nobody has time or money for that. They're not interested because it doesn't solve a big problem for them. They have way bigger problems to solve before they start thinking about 3D models of trees. And still, I think like I kept like working on that problem for way too long until I realized like, hey, there's actually like other problems that we can solve with this thing as well. And there were like companies that were calling us like all the time. They're like, well, can we use those 3D models for like machine learning models, or like we have all these problems that we want to solve with those 3D models. It's like, no, I'm working for architects. And so I feel like if you're like one of the biggest mistakes or struggles for us was really like, how long do you like hold on to that like one initial idea, this like one project that you have, and at what point do you think like, hey, there's something worth just like pursuing, solving these problems, and like completely focusing on doing that, just rather than keeping working on that one single project. And that's for us when like everything changed, when like we got accepted into an accelerator program in New York, first investments came in, first customers came in. So it's like this like really big pivotal moment for me that I realized, just like start actually solving a problem.
That's so cool. And was there like a specific moment that you decided, well, actually, like, can you really think back to a certain day that you realized like, well, actually this happened, and then...
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I can, which is kind of embarrassing. There's like, this is like one person like from an autonomous vehicle company that like had been like calling us already like for like a while. And he was like, these trees, they can like solve like our data problem. Like they had to like go all around the world and like photograph different streets and like label them, and it was like way too much work for them. And they were like, if we can just use your 3D models of trees, it would solve all of these problems for us. And I just was like, no, let's talk later. And like like a couple months later, he called again. And was like, no, let's talk later. I'm working for architects. And then there was this like pivotal moment for me where I like realized like, hey, maybe I should give this guy a call. And I feel like that moment is really when things start to turn around.
Okay, cool. And Jeroen, how did you get into entrepreneurship? Did you first have another job after studying? Was there a moment that you jumped fully into Swimtraxx that you felt like this is the time?
Well, it's a long story, so I'm going to try to keep it short because it's basically starting when I was 12 or something like that. So I've been always swimming, like you mentioned in the beginning, and it's my big passion. I love the sport, and growing up, I developed a big interest in technology and science, and was doing these things in school, and I thought, oh, math is really cool, and physics is really cool. And back then, it was the period in which like, the super suits in swimming, if you still remember, that they were wearing these full body suits that would make them float better and these kind of things. So it was quite a technological period in swimming, and I was really thinking about moving in that direction, making those suits better. And that was like my North Star. I was thinking, that's maybe something I can do. And then when I was 17, I went to the States. I chose aerodynamical engineering, so aerospace engineering, because I was into flying. You know, I was thinking hydrodynamics fits in there, and going through college, I understood that wearables were coming up, electronics was coming up, and suits were banned, so that solved the problem as well. And moving forward, I really developed the interest in the technology and the human body, so I studied biomedical engineering. And I was always thinking, like, how can I apply? How can I do something in swimming? Because the thing is, if you're a swimmer, you don't earn any money. Like, even if you're an Olympic champion, typically you don't earn a living from it. There are occasions that that's the case, but in general, there's not a big ROI on swimming. So you're always thinking, like, how can I make this a career after? And so that thought led up to actually me looking for a master's thesis within my biomedical degree, like in sports. And I ended up doing something in swimming, which was purely by luck. I proposed my own subjects, which is tracking swimmers. So this is 2011. And I got off the PhD afterwards because obviously I was super motivated for the master's thesis. I did a PhD in some other stuff, but similar technologies, and it all moved from there. And then after my PhD, I just wanted to do something else. I went into business consulting. But after 1 year, I was like, okay, I need to do something with this idea and build it. And so 2018 was the year I made that choice. I left my job, started the company, and this is where we are today. So that's a bit the story leading up to this.
Wow.
It's quite long. It's really passionate.
Cool. So you just went from one moment to the next full in. You just jumped in. It wasn't like a transitional period that you worked still for a little bit.
I turned 30, and I had my PhD. I did the job, and I was like, okay, this is the moment. I mean, if you do a startup, people think it's for a while, but I was pretty certain it was going to be 10 years at least, which is typically what it takes. So I was like, okay, let's do this from 30 to 40 at least. I'm halfway, a little bit over halfway. So it was really like, it's all or nothing. I've been like thinking about this idea, like doing it on the side, and like, creating ideas at home in the evening, making Excel sheets, do some analysis. And, like, the whole way, just do it. Yeah.
Cool. Nice. So even though, I mean, halfway over to between 30 and 40, I think you're still very young. But for both of you, being young entrepreneurs, what has helped you? Emiel, you mentioned already that I think you said the incubator in New York. What has helped you the most, and what do you think that we, as whether it's society or government or whatever, should be doing to encourage and make it easier for young people to start their own business?
I think there are like so many things, and also I'm not sure, like obviously, because like I've never been on the policy side of this. But I feel like those incubators and accelerators are like extremely interesting for us. Our experience in New York, going to this accelerator where for 4 months long we just had like courses on how to pitch, how to prepare a pitch deck, how to talk to investors, being connected to a bunch of investors, talking to all of your problems with just like experienced entrepreneurs who have like exited 4 successful startups and like know the whole spiel. That is super important, and like I feel like we learned so much from that. But I feel like when I talk with most people that are just like interested here starting a startup, everybody always has this feeling of like, maybe I want to do something, but first I need a good idea. And I feel like that's the one thing maybe not easy to change or something, but I think is definitely something that I would try to challenge, where like really I feel like you don't need to have a good idea. There are like tens of like millions of stupid things you can start with, and I feel like I started with one of those stupid things. It was like definitely proven to be not a good idea. But if you're somehow like foolish enough to kind of like push through that, like find some time and have the privilege to be able to spend some time working on that product and or that problem and pursuing the doors that open through pursuing that problem, I feel like that just like gets you the way there. So I feel like it doesn't need to be such a big limit or like threshold to start, as long as you kind of like have the opportunity or the privilege to start out as a person. And so that's, I think, what we can give as a people to like help people bridge that, is like make it as easy as possible and just like provide the space like we're here right now. Provide like small bits of funding, like the K Leuven does, for example. And those are like those tiny little things that really help like bridge that like first little gap.
Yeah, I completely agree. I want to jump on that. I mean, I remember deciding to go all in, and looking back at that moment already, I realized I could have done it a lot earlier. That's typically the idea that, yeah, I could have done this actually 5 years earlier. Like, why did I do a PhD? I should have just started with the idea. And so I think what strikes me quite often is the fact that like the US is like where people do entrepreneurship and a lot of startups. But if you think about it, the risk is so much lower in Belgium. I mean, if something happens to you in Belgium, there's healthcare, there's like a full support network, like society that takes care of you. Mm-hmm. So the risk is actually a lot less to start a startup in Belgium or in Europe compared to the US. So then I start thinking like, what's causing the fact that the risk is so low to actually start it and people still don't do it. I think it's a mentality aspect. On the one hand, like what you're saying, like people don't have enough examples or don't see enough examples, because I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs in Belgium that don't get as much exposure maybe as in the US, because the US is really a culture of entrepreneurs and they really promote it. So I think these initiatives are great to do that. The K Leuven has done a lot since I graduated for entrepreneurship, so it's great. So I think that's one thing, like lowering that barrier and making it clear that it's not that hard. It's just human people doing it. It's like not crazy Elon Musks that start a company. It's just normal people. So I think that's definitely something that I learned and saw in the past years. And then on the policy side, I agree that I'm not a policymaker, so it's hard. It's easy to say this, tax that. But I think in general, if I look at the US, there's a lot more incentives, or like it's easier to start. There's a lot less regulations. I think what I've experienced starting a company, hiring people, I think that's been a lot of challenge compared to that. But once you find a good partner to work with to organize all that administration, it's actually super easy. So it's just talking to people that have done it and asking them how have you done it, and then just talk to these guys that can help you. That fixes your problem. I think entrepreneurship is not that hard as long as you get the people around you that can actually coach you in the right direction. I think building a network and talking to a lot of people just makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, I think like making the comparison between the States and Belgium actually like is really interesting, because there's just like a lot of entrepreneurship in the States, and it probably has to do with a mentality. But also, like one of the things that I really experienced as a bottleneck for me is like here, if you want to make the jump and like become self-employed, that means like from day one, like the first quarter, you have to like pay 800 euros per quarter, and so like that's money that you have to come up with from nowhere. So like whether you make money or not, and that is like a big barrier. So like for me, just like working on this project, I wanted to like try things out, sell things in like a legal way. But it was like, if I don't make enough money to cover that 800 euros, I can't really like start a company and like test things out. And I feel like that was a big sort of like fire retardant on being able to like actually start. Whereas in the US, you just sell something and then you fill it out somewhere on your tax forms and it's fine. There's a big difference.
800 euros is the minimum tax you have to pay.
Yeah, it's like social security tax. I think like whatever you make, like you don't even make like a single euro of income, like you still have to pay that amount. Yeah.
And
that's before paying your accountant.
Yeah, exactly.
And also going further into the comparison of the US and Belgium, I'm sure that you've also spoken then to Belgian entrepreneurs who've also gone probably through an accelerator program. Do the programs differ a lot?
There are a lot of differences. I've had the experience to be able to go through, started at KBC as well in Belgium, and then ERA, Entrepreneurs Roundtable Accelerator in New York. And they're like, both are great, but they're just like very different, where in like, for example, started at KBC is very much focused on just lowering that threshold that we were just talking about, providing some free office space, providing a basic coach that can help you with things, and like you see them like once a week or like once every 2 weeks. But it was very different. Like the ERA accelerator was an accelerator where they invested $100,000 in our company. It was literally like every single day we had like different sessions on how to pitch, on how to prepare these decks. But also every Monday I entered the office and my whole calendar was just like filled for the entire week with just like 10, 20 people that they thought would be interesting for me to meet and to talk with investors, business partners, corporates. And so it's just really something that you can't really compare. All props to like these really cool programs and incubators here. It is really on a different scale, I feel like.
Cool. And to anybody listening at any time that wants to become an entrepreneur but doesn't have an idea, I literally have a list of like 100 things, so you can contact me. I was also wondering, like, did you find the available resources easily that you needed, that you said that you've used? Because sometimes I do hear that on these talks that they're all there, but it's difficult to find them, and also to make that step to think, okay, I've got a valuable enough idea to go out and ask for it. How did you experience that, Jeroen?
I think so. We're a bootstrap company so far. We're doing our first investment round now. So I think in terms of it, like finding the funds, we've tried to do it as much as possible with non-dilutives. So not getting a part of the company for cash, basically. And in the past 5 years, I've seen a lot of effort from the government to actually make it easier for people to understand where the funding is. I had a feeling in the beginning when we started, you really had to know where to look, and you had these consultants that you could pay that would look for you and write your proposals. They still exist and it's still valuable in some cases, but I feel like the Flemish government is doing a lot of effort to make it easier to find them. They have like this monthly newsletter with like just a list of funds you could actually find. I really recommend this. You just scroll through your email, and if it matches with what you're doing, you can apply for it, and that way it makes a level playing field, which I think is great. I think that's the hard part about the government funding so far, is making a level playing field so everybody can apply to actually could be able to use it, that you don't need to have like somebody working full time to fill in timesheets during a project and making the proposals and these kind of things. So I think they're doing a lot of great work on that level, and I think that's like as a startup locally a good place to start to look, because it's government funding, it's not dilutive, and it's easy to find. We started, and I think you also still started in a pretty good financial climate where loans were still interesting. I think now that's different, but there's still a lot of opportunity out there. I think there's still investors looking for opportunities out there. I mean, there's cash in this world to pretty high amounts, so it's just about talking to people, understanding where to find them, understanding your USP, just understanding what your value is for the people that you're actually getting money from. Just seeing like your customer basically, and just going out there and talking to as much people as possible and finding. I think that's the main idea, I think.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Maybe just like in terms of like really first steps, I feel like just like anybody being here right now or like listening in is probably like the right place. Also, like we were like in this place called Studio Start, which if you're in Leuven is like just like the greatest resource to just walk in, talk about, I have an idea, and like they help you out, like connect you with people and like talk you through like what does that actually mean. And I feel like they're like since just like the last couple of years, like a ton of these like tiny little incubators, little like people that are talking about things at universities or like even like town organizations. Like we've had the possibility just a couple blocks further, like in literally the city hall. Like that's where I started. Just talking to people from Stad Leuven, and just like saying like, hey, I'm working on this idea. Like, do you have any office space for me? And they're like, oh yeah, sure. Like, come sit in the town hall like for free. So there are like a lot of resources. I feel like we're very spoiled here in Belgium. You only have to ask to find out.
I was just going to say that you have to dare to ask. It's like you have to pluck up the courage and go and do that. Okay, let's talk a little bit about product development. Emiel, I was curious, like, how have you determined, like, when is your product a good fit for the market? Are there specific, like, metrics and KPIs that you're using to assess that?
That's a good question. It all in the end comes down to revenue. Like, however you turn it, it just like, can you make money? It sucks. Like, really, like as like climate like enthusiast and we're like a climate company, I'm always like, save the planet. But then in the end, if you want to survive as a company, if you want to be able to like pay everybody that's working on your team, well, you gotta actually like either find funding or get people to pay for your product. And so that's the one metric that matters in the end. And so for us, that's also kind of like what we keep as a North Star, developing our products and like talking to people is like always pushing that sales conversation, not to just like, are you interested and why, but actually like, are you willing to pay for this? And like, what is this worth to you? And I feel like that's where initially we kept getting like stuck like too easily. We're like, oh, they're interested. Let's develop this product. Let's develop a prototype and like give it to them. But actually taking the step, like one step further and saying like, no, like if you're actually interested into this, like $20,000, like, is that like how much you're like that's worth to you? And they're like, oh no, that's not what's worth for it. Like 10,000. Like, oh okay, yeah, let's talk. And like all of a sudden, like you start to realize if something's actually interesting to people, or if they're just like interested in you developing some kind of like interesting thing for them. It's just a big difference. So it's really hard sometimes to measure, are people actually interested in your product or not? And I think just revenue or like that dollar sign, like really the one metric to follow.
Right. And Jeroen, how did you develop Swimtraxx's product and the pricing specifically? How are you working on research and development furthering, and has the offering like changed with that over time or? So
in general, we work a lot on the idea first. Actually, the first name of Swimtraxx was Lab Coach, which was a terrible idea. So that was the first thing we fixed. Giving it a name that actually says what it does has been really great. And then we really looked at how other products are priced in this space, because I think sports tracking is like an established space, but not specifically for swimming and specific swim tracker. So we looked at some proxies in other sports and then decided to start there. And what we did actually before even starting anything with production or anything like that was a pre-order campaign. We didn't do a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo, but we did it on our own website. And so with just 500 euros in advertising spend on Facebook, we just launched it. And in the end, I think we got something around 30,000 euros in revenue. So we were able to see which people reacted on it. Back then, tracking on Facebook was crazy. It's all been limited now. Back then, you could really do crazy stuff with it. You could see what kind of people would react to your ads. You would see if there were traffic leads, if there were certain leads and these kind of things. So that was really a market study by generating revenue. Then COVID hit, like I said, and then we had to wait for a bit. But so I think it's exactly like you say, like the best proof in the pudding is selling your product or trying to sell some MVP or some idea. And in our case, really a pre-order and like seeing if people are just interested and willing to pay money for the idea, basically, in our case. We did have some development which you could show, but I mean, it wasn't there yet. And then we moved forward from there and we developed it. And since then, we've been talking to big teams. We've been adding team kits to our range. So it's like a collection of units that you can buy in a box that you can charge. And, we've been adding a lot of features in the apps, obviously, which is a lot easier than the hardware part because the hardware part has to be pretty good up front. And then on the app side, you can just add a button and just it works with teams. So it's really about building the product in a flexible way that's usable for a lot of applications in the future and testing it up front. With your customers, I think is always something you should do.
And I'm hearing also from both of you, it's all about data. To both of you, it's going already a little bit into our next topic. Did you do everything yourself, from building the product, making your website, selling, or have you outsourced certain things? And how did you decide what to outsource?
Simple answer, no. It is just not possible to do everything yourself. And there's one thing, like even right now, there's like 7 people working on our team. And like even now, I just like realize every day, like this is such a small team to actually build out like a big product that solves a big problem. And so it's just trying to like get around to solve enough problems to then be able to like go a little bit bigger to eventually go to that one point where you want to go. But it's really hard to do that like with a small team, and it's even harder alone. So yes, when you start out, I guess you have to, or at least you can try to find a co-founder that is really complementary to you. And to me, I feel like that's like where a lot of credit is due. It's like I've been able like maybe like I love like making these like big visions, but I've been able to like partner up with a good friend of mine who's insanely great at like keeping it real. Doing all of the like sort of like the business side of it, like how do you structure such a sales call? How do you actually set up such a company and bring all of that to like just like real everyday life? And I feel like without any of that help, like I would never be here.
How did you meet that partner? Was it somebody you studied with or?
Kindergarten.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. Great networking. Yes.
And Jeroen, how was it for you?
Well, I'm a single founder, so that's maybe a nice like different side of the story. I don't think there's a good or bad in both of them. I think it's just how it turns out because I tried to actually start something with a co-founder. Happy I didn't eventually. Still great people. I mean, there's nothing wrong there, but you really it's marrying, right? I mean, basically you get into marriage, you share a big part of your life, probably more than actually with your spouse. You're going to spend your full working days with them. So it's really important that you match well up with them and that you find a good way of working. In my case, I did it solo, which I think is also great because I just set up the lines. There's no real touch points I need to have with anybody, which is also convenient because I know the market quite well on the technological side, so that worked out. It's quite lonely sometimes. I think it's nice to have a co-founder, but that I solved with just talking to other founders, so it's not that big of a deal. So I think if you want to be a solo founder, just because a lot of people tell you to find a co-founder because your success rate will be lower and these kind of things, but I think if you really want to do it and if your passion's big enough, that will solve a lot of the general rules of entrepreneurship. Just do it, really. And then obviously I didn't do everything myself, so we hired our first person into the team. I think we were not even 1 year olds as a company, and then we just keep adding people to the team and hiring freelancers to do some things. And what I generally have as a rule, if I notice that I'm spending a lot of time on something and I'm just able to do it easily and I can explain to somebody how to do it, then generally you should probably not be doing it yourself as an entrepreneur. I think what you should mainly be doing is working on looking forward, where you want to go, talking with your team, making sure your team functions well, and have a vision for the product. I think if you're going into a lot of administrative stuff and this kind of thing, which I don't do too much still, that's not a good sign. That's really something that's not really valuable stuff. But it's hard sometimes. I don't know if you have the same problem, but like if you're driven by passion, you generally say like, I'm going to do this and this and this and this. But actually the reflex should be, if you want to do something like, who can I find to help me do this? And like, is it cost effective to do so? And how can I actually fix the problem? That's the kind of problem you should be fixing as an entrepreneur. Like finding a way to make it be fixed and rather than fixing it yourself, which is really hard because you want to fix it. It's there, so that's a bit the idea I have about that.
Yeah, at the same time, I feel like for me, it's also like one of the bigger revelations, because I was like very scared in the beginning that like that would be one of the like issues that I would like encounter a lot. I feel like one of the like really nice parts about being able to like work on this project is also being able to like just like build out a team of like people that are super talented and like really, really, really good at what they're doing, like machine learning engineers, like forestry experts. And, like I'm learning so much from them, where it also like it really doesn't feel like hard to pass something to them, because like you're just like learning from like just like and watching in amazement how they solve these problems, and being able to like combine all of that together and like working towards the same goal. It feels like it's just really nice, and it's like one of the nicest things I think about like being an entrepreneur is just like you get to experience that feeling.
Yeah, it's the biggest area of growth I think that you can experience as an entrepreneur, and I hear from a lot of colleagues and entrepreneurs, is that managing, building a team, it's super hard, but it's super rewarding. It's so much fun, like building that team that has the same vision, that it's basically like providing people with the opportunity to share the dream, right? And building that dream and just doing it. And it's really hard, and especially in the beginning, because like, it was just a guy coming out of a PhD sitting in an office doing my job. And then suddenly I had to like build a team, tell people what the vision is, and then explaining things and how we're going to build everything. It's been crazy, but like after a while you build that the skills, and I think entrepreneurship is maybe adding to that one of the areas where you will most like find the biggest challenge in your weakest areas, because as an entrepreneur, like those will stand out. Especially when you're leading a team. And so being an entrepreneur, there's no way to hide your soft spots or your weak spots. You really have to fix them and work on them and understand what they are. And if they're not fixable, find a solution for them, because you just need to. And that has been the biggest area of growth, like working with people, understanding what their own weaknesses are, and growing in that area. I think that's just amazing.
Cool, thank you. So, as I said, it's a great bridge to our final topic. Is like, building your network and expertise. So, building further on the previous, how have you built your network around you, and how have you found those right people, like you said, like a forester and the craziest 3D modeler, and I don't know what else, Emiel?
Make a lot of friends in kindergarten. No, but for real, actually, I feel like a lot of the connections that have been super helpful have come either directly just from like making a lot of friends, or like just like talking to a lot of people and just being excited to like learn about their stories, or just like making friends. And those friends like might someday like turn out to actually cross your path, or might join you on this small venture. I know it's like a strange answer, but like I feel like I would place like just friends at the top. They're the ones who can introduce you, like come up with ideas or like rooting for you. Like you see your LinkedIn post and they're like, oh, you should talk to this friend of mine. And then turns out it's like she's an investor and she's really cool. Yeah, I don't know. It's not the right answer probably, but I feel like friends.
Cool. Jeroen?
Yeah, I mean, like I'm not the kind of person that likes to go to network events, but I'm the kind of person who likes to make friends. So I try to also have always have the mindset to make friends at network events because it's important. It's just a lot of fun. I don't like to think about functional relationships, but rather like that's a cool person. I just like to spend an evening with that person talking about whatever, and that's basically my network is former colleagues who started a company. Great group of friends there. I mean, people from high school, people from swimming. Swimming obviously is like a huge network of a variety of people. I think sports is a great place to do so. And then obviously, as you build the company, you go to the accelerators and meet a lot of people there, and that share their passion for like building something. So it's typically people that are doing the same thing like you, they'll have some common area, and they tend to be friends. Yeah, I think that's a good way. I've never looked at that specifically with that word, but it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's a good answer.
Cool.
Thank you.
So then I'm also curious, what expertise did you either, go and get externally? What did you pay for through freelancers or consultants? What were the things that you said, okay, I have to have somebody else do that? Jeroen?
I think the first thing I got was an accountant. That's, I think, always the first thing as an entrepreneur because it's so complex to do it yourself. I know some people do it themselves, but they're typically like solo, independent workers. But that's the first thing. Maybe it makes a lot of sense, but that's actually the first thing you need to do to make sure you don't have a lot of administrative load. And then, in the second instance, really looking at what is the most important capability that I want to build up in my company. What is the know-how I want to have in-house? So there's quite some startups that in the technology outsource their technology. I believe personally that if you want to have a good technology startup, building up the know-how inside of the company is something super valuable because a freelancer comes and goes. Somebody that's part of your team joins a dream is somebody that is going to help contribute to that for the long term. And I really feel about that way, and we still hire mainly for people joining the team. But it's always a trade-off, and then obviously there are things that are super valuable for the company, but maybe not like super strategic capabilities that you need to work out of. Which is, for example, something we did in the beginning was we outsourced a lot of marketing in the beginning because we didn't really know where we were going to put that yet, so we experimented with marketeers and these kind of things. So it's really thinking about what do you want to do long term, what's going to be my thing moving forward, and for us that's like firmware, hardware, software, that's things we want to do. Other things we outsource. So that's a bit the guiding we have. But we have made mistakes in that. I mean, there's a lot of mistakes. We maybe haven't talked a lot about mistakes, but we make a lot of mistakes along the road. But that's always the learning. Like this is maybe not something we need right now.
I would say like everything where you would be in deep trouble if you fuck up, outsource it. So that would be one, accountant, and second, lawyers. Like don't do it yourself. There's like rule number one. But then like for all the rest, I'm like a huge proponent of doing everything like yourself or like between you and your co-founder or co-founders. And I feel like a lot of people that I talk to that are starting or like want to start with a company are always like, I want to do this, but like I first need a technical person, or I first need somebody who knows about business, or I don't know, like solve for problem X. And I think like that's one of the things that like really shouldn't hold you back. There are like a million things that you'll have to do as a startup founder that you can't do as of yet. But you can just try it. Like if you need to like, for example, like code something, there are like really good tutorials, and it's really not that hard to like program some like small little thing. You have ChatGPT right now. You can just like say like, do this for me, and it does it for you. There's so many ways to like learn these small things. And if you need to do machine learning, like don't think like, oh, I need to have somebody who's like really, really great at programming. Like there are some really small things that you can learn to do yourself. Build some like basic mock-up website. And if that's what gets you in the door, and that's what gets you the first like couple of dollars, with that money you can actually hire somebody who can actually develop the product. But in the beginning you like really don't need that many other people. You just need to be open to do anything. And that gets you to a point where you just, after a while, you get to be pretty like good, I was gonna say, but like maybe be like pretty mediocre at just like a lot of things. But that makes you great.
Yeah, exactly. And actually also by doing it yourself first, you actually know what you want. Because how are you gonna hire somebody for a job if you don't even know what that person actually would need to do? So there's some level of getting a little bit up to speed and understanding what the person in your team would be able to do, and then I think that's a great approach.
Yeah, and it gives a lot of confidence as well, where I feel like now, like, I don't know, like I know how to like build a basic website, and like whatever problem like I ever have in my life, like if making a website for it, like I can do it, I can do the basic things. Or if it's like building some software model, or if it's like finding an investor, or if it is like making a deck, or there are like so many things, like skills that apply to like whatever like is gonna happen to your startup, like is gonna apply to new startups, new jobs, personal life, and you get to like just learn them on the fast track by going through this journey as an entrepreneur.
Okay, cool. I think it's time to go to the audience and see if they have any questions. I'm trying to see in the chat. I'm not seeing anything. No. Okay, right. Any questions from our live audience here? Yes, go on ahead and I'll repeat for the people following online. Okay, for the people following online, what was your silliest mistake, or maybe even your biggest mistake that you made? As you said, we haven't talked maybe a lot about mistakes, so what was the one that really sticks in your mind that you're like, oh God, why did I do that?
So many silly mistakes. I don't know, like one of them that I'm thinking about right now is like we had this like, I don't know, like this meeting, like we were just like work on this thing, and like we were at that point we were in New York, this accelerator, and I get a message from somebody who's also from Belgium, who's like the CEO of Data Campers, like a huge company, and he's like obviously like has like very wealthy, and he was just like, let's talk, like let's grab a coffee. It was like, oh, this is cool, but I was like, I just went to the coffee, like we had a talk, we had a chat. He's like, so, okay, so tell me about your company. So like I tell him about the company. And like after a while, it's like, okay, this is super interesting. I want to invest. And I'm like, excuse me? Yeah. What are you saying? You're like, yeah, like, do you have the papers ready? Like, I want to, like, I'm investing in you. And I was like, yeah, I don't know how that works. So it was like, okay, I have to like run home now, like call our lawyers, like call people that know how this works, and like having to like set everything up. And then 3 weeks later, because like this takes time, like I was like, oh, finally I have like everything ready, and then he was like, yeah, I'm like actually like right now it's not really working out, so yeah, maybe not. And he's been like a great mentor, and he's been like super helpful. Unfortunately, he hasn't become an investor, but I feel like that's one of the very silly mistakes. Is like if you go through such a conversation, at least be prepared with an investment little document.
Damn.
Yeah, damn.
Good story, Jeroen.
Yeah, in terms of like when you make a hardware product, we found out testing is quite important. And so we have so many stories, which I'm not going to share all, but we've walked up to demos to customers which we thought were very important, like we're getting to test some things, and then being in the demo and like giving live demos with hardware products is just, yeah, it's an experience. And so we went to a demo and we hadn't tested fully through, and we were like, yeah, let's try the new software release that we are preparing to launch in the demo without actually having tested and released it. And so we went to this demo, and like before everything was fine, like all the parameters we wanted to get out were good, and then we had this not even beta release on this device in demo, and it wasn't even tracking labs, heart rate was completely off, It was horrible, and you're just standing there with a customer with a system that is generating gibberish data, and having to explain like, yeah, but I think it's just a software problem, and we're going to fix this until next time. And you really have to explain to your customer what's going on. I mean, there's like even like, I don't know if you've seen this, but like even Steve Jobs had been uploading photos in front of an audience, and it was failing. Like that's how hard giving a hardware demos is, and we were just thinking that we would wing it with some prototype to a customer. So that's been the experience, yeah. And it hasn't been happening once. It happens a lot.
Cool, good question. Any other questions? Yes? So for people following online, what was the moment that you really felt ready to start, or I would say then maybe launch the company, that you really felt like, okay, the idea or the business plan or the product or whatever is ready, now we go?
The question itself is, I don't know how to say it in English, but it's like it's a false question. You're never ready. And so the thing is that at some point I just realized I just needed to do it. I was never going to be ready. I mean, I think I had an idea of doing something with technology, not in entrepreneurship per se when I was like 17, but I knew I wanted to do it that direction. I think if I would have a lot of exposure to people starting a company back then, I maybe would have considered it a lot earlier. So that's one thing. I think there's a lot of lack of exposure to it, especially back then. I think it's getting a lot better here. But if you have a lot of entrepreneurs around you, you start thinking in the mindset of, okay, but I want to solve this problem. I can't do it anywhere else. I'm going to do it myself. And then I was thinking, okay, maybe I should get a degree first. And then I was like, okay, maybe I should get a PhD first. Maybe I should get some work experience first. And then, like after that work experience, like what am I doing? Like, I'm just trying to get these things on my CV for a job that doesn't require a CV. And like life doesn't require a CV, right? So just do it. I think if I would have started 5 years earlier, I would have learned a lot more in relation to what I'm doing today. I've learned a lot by doing my degrees. It's very valuable. But I think if I would have started, for example, when I was 22 instead of 30, I would have learned 8 years what entrepreneurship is, and I would now be 36 with like 8 years extra entrepreneurship learnings and making a lot of mistakes probably, but when you're young, it matters a lot less than when you get older. So I think starting earlier is always the right choice.
Yeah, for me it started, I don't know, like kind of like a weird timing where like after I graduated, I somehow like figured out to get like 20 free flight tickets, which is a story for another time. Like happy to talk about that another time. But so like I had this like weird period after graduating where just like visiting friends, like first all over the States and then all over Europe, which like terrible for the environment. And now I'm like talking about the climate, but hey, it was just like this like period where I like had a lot of time, was like was flying for free and like staying with friends. So and just like working on this like project that was like making these 3D models of trees. And it wasn't until it was like, wow, I didn't realize, but like you can actually like get a little bit tired of traveling. It's possible. I don't know. Like after a while, it's like this has been a lot. It's been great, but I'm ready to go back home, go back to Belgium. And I realized like, okay, like maybe I should do something, like have a job or do something for serious. And I just felt like these projects that I've been working on is just like way too interesting. Why don't I just like stay at home with my parents and like not pay any rent? And I had some money left over with which I could buy food and just like work on this like one little problem. So for me, that kind of like was a soft start for me as, I guess, like as an entrepreneur. But saying that, like I know, like I realize that it's like it still comes like with a lot of privileges, and I feel like making that step, I feel like for both of us has been really easy in a way. Obviously, we're just like we can dedicate some of our time, like months of time, to just like start working on this and like take this big risk. But it's just like not a possibility for everybody. And sometimes it's just like a reality that you just have to like work on in the evenings or in the weekends until you get to a point where you realize like, wow, this is worth something, and you can actually like take one day a week off or do some consulting in the meantime. So I really realized that it's really not that easy for everybody. But for me, silly enough, by just moving back to my parents, it actually worked out.
Cool. So what was the spark that you made you change from one idea because you had this project that you really wanted to get, and then what was the spark to pivot and say, well, no, we're going to do the other one?
It's definitely like one of the things is like having these calls with like this like person like kept calling back and was like, hey, like I want to give you money for like what you're doing, you know, like not really right now. So like that really like was one of the like obviously like big sparks. But I feel like for me it was also just after a while kind of like coming to terms with yourself, because you always start out in like a super optimistic way. At least I do. You're like, oh, I have this like cool idea and it's gonna change the world. It's gonna be $1 billion and everybody's gonna be happy and the world's gonna be a sustainable space. And then like after a while, like you make this thing and like you try to like actually sell it and you realize like maybe it was not such a great idea. I don't know. And there's this sort of like reckoning with yourself, which is not like a pop-up moment where it's like, oh, now all of a sudden I realize like I see the light. I feel like it was just like this gradual process of just realizing like, hey, this is really not the way. Like if I actually want to do this the right way, I should focus really on solving people's problems instead of just being my cocky self and working on this silly problem. And just like that took a while for me, but I feel like it's really one of the biggest assets I still take with me.
Yeah, I think that's also learning for me. I think when you start, you think, yeah, I'm going to do this idea and it's going to be great. And then moving forward, you just realize that the system is built in a way that you only get value when you deliver value. And so people only pay, like your money is like a vote for your idea. And it's a really nice system because once you get that, you're actually doing something that people want to spend money on. And it takes some time, like for me at least, and I feel for you as well, it took some time to get like understanding that building a startup is actually finding a way to do something for other people, whether it's a company or B2C, like customers. And it's really cool because once they start buying your product, they're doing something useful for them because they're spending money on you. And so, of course, there's like a variety within that space, but like that's the learning I think that you have to go to when you're an entrepreneur and understand that that's like the main, that's the core of the system that we're working with.
Great insights here. Yes, go ahead. Okay, so the first part of the question is the difference in target audiences, US versus Europe, maybe specifically Belgium, and US. And second of all, have you ever said no to a customer or an investor?
So twice, yes. So there's a big difference between the different geographies, even within Europe, especially in sports. For example, in Belgium, sports is super underfunded. It's like half the budget of culture even, so culture is already quite low. So sports teams don't have money here, and so that's a big contrast. For example, college teams in the US, who typically have discretionary funds, depending on how to get that. But so there's a big difference in the market, especially in sports, but that's, I think, for a lot of markets. But there's also a big difference in consumer behavior, I find. I think an American typically looks more at spending money as really giving that vote and saying, yeah, I want to help. That's a cool idea, and then spend it. Whereas in Europe, they're more like, should I give this company my money? Like there's more a saving behavior somehow, which is fine. I mean, it's just difference. So there's definitely a difference between geographies worldwide. So everywhere there's a difference, even country by country. And then, obviously, I have said a lot of no's to customers, especially in the beginning when you're not sure yet what the pricing should be, or what the product should look like, or what features you should provide. And there's this famous quote of Henry Ford. I don't know if you heard it, but if Henry Ford would have listened to his customers, he would still be making horses instead of cars, because customers don't always understand where you're going at. And so that's the same for us. Like in consuming technology, there's this understanding that there's a stopwatch and a wall, and we often get questions in this direction, and we used to say no to those ideas because it's not the future we're looking for. And also in terms of pricing, like, if people don't want to pay for your product, it's just not imagined. They don't understand your value, or you're maybe not specifically making something for them. So definitely you said a lot of no to customers. Of course, don't say no too much. Understand where you're bringing the value, and then if you're not bringing the value, understand that's just not.
Have you adapted the hard or software for the different geography areas?
Not geography, so we're still only English. You can't leverage it a lot of languages. We can't carry that yet. But we do, like we have made team kits, and that's actually more for bigger teams, which you would typically find more outside of Belgium. So we have made a separate offering, like on top of our products for different markets. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe a thought about the first question is just like about like the target audience. I feel like this is one of the things that I really got to deal with a lot while talking with investors, going through that accelerator. Is like one thing, like if you want to go the route of a venture-backed startup, or like venture capital-backed startup, which means that like investors, like venture capital investors, will invest in like consecutive rounds, and it's not necessarily like bootstrapped or like a, I don't know, like a small company, which is again also like really fine, like a really good goal as an entrepreneur. We very much chose to sort of like the track as a venture-backable company, which means that you don't necessarily aim for revenue to come in to get like break even, but you really just want to get to the next round, like raise more money, build a bigger team, go to the next round, like just like always go bigger. But the only way to do that sort of track is if you're able to find, or like an addressable market, total addressable market, or also called TAM, that's big enough, and really like it needs to be like $30 billion or more, which is like a crazy big number. It just like means that like every year, like at least $30 billion is spent on the problem that you're trying to solve. And that just like very quickly eliminates just only working on Belgium, because like in Belgium there's probably only like a couple problems that like $30 billion is being spent on every year, right? And so I feel like having that mindset from the beginning, like if that's what you're going for, that sort of like venture capital backtrack, you really got to think about like how does this scale globally? And obviously there are differences in the way that things work. And one of the things that we realize is if we do things in the United States, well, there's just like one stream of data. It's like all the same language. It's all the same stuff to work with. And like instantly there's like 250 million people that become part of your total addressable market. Whereas if you're in Belgium, it's like all the same effort for maybe 10 million people. And so there's like this constant like back and forth between like what is the next thing that you're thinking about, and like how do you build to that next round. But really, again, like it always has to be in this like idea of it needs to be really, really, really big, the problem that you're solving.
Cool. And have you said no to any investors? Like the investor said no to you 3 weeks later?
Yeah, totally, definitely. There, one of the more interesting ones was this really dubious character that at some point like walked through our co-working space in New York, and he, I don't know, just like talked to somebody, and that person was like, oh, you should talk to the Genvision guys because they're like into climate. And that kind of started this really weird relationship with this guy. Is like really capitalistic American dude who's like very rich and like walks around in this like purple flannel jacket, and he has like a little bit of style, but also like really not. And it's like a really strange person, and he has always like has this like Chinese lady with him, which he calls his consort, which is, I don't know, it's like it's so bizarre. And so I just like went on a couple of meetings with them, but like they're actually interested in like investing $3 million in our startup, which is like a lot of money, like 3 million. We're like instantly, we don't need any investors anymore. But then also at the same time, like we realized like if we say yes to this for one, we have to spend time with this guy, like much more time than what we're already doing right now. This weird guy with this Chinese lady. But then secondly, like it also means that like, I don't know, you're also missing out of all of these like investors that now can help you or that can connect you to the next investors. And so yes, very much I've said no, and that's a big no.
Good learning. Okay, I'm gonna wrap it up actually because we've gone through our hour already. It's been a super interesting chat. Thank you to both of you for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Super. So thank you to everyone that joined here live and online, and to our future listeners. Thank you Studio Start for the location. We are organising the next edition of StartUP Warm-Up on September 28th at the Irish College in Leuven. It's an event where you get the opportunity to watch startups and scale-ups pitch their ideas, products and services to an experienced jury. So if you have an idea or a startup that you would like to pitch, you don't have to have a company specifically, but you just want to get some experience, you can, and you can still have time to register. All the info can be found on our website and social channels. It's a great opportunity, like the guy said, to come and just have a chat, meet like-minded people, try and make some friends, and build out your network. Tickets can also be bought on Eventbrite for people who just want to come and watch the pitches and then also have some drinks and networking afterwards. We'll be back on October 11th for another episode of Startup Stories, so I'll see you then. Thank you and have a great day.